Blood Ravens occupy a strange and sometimes uncomfortable place within the Imperium, a chapter standing at the junction of myth and suspicion. Their origins remain one of the most contentious questions in the Adeptus Astartes, built around fragmentary records, unreliable testimonies, and a pattern of behaviour that has for centuries quietly marked them out as an anomaly. They demonstrate an obsessive preoccupation with knowledge, an unusually high number of librarians, and a cultural disposition towards archival recovery that would seem eccentric for most chapters, but borders on defining for them. To understand the Blood Ravens as we approach the era implied by the future Dawn of War 4, it becomes necessary to examine their history, not only as a fragmented lore but as a lived narrative, through the campaigns that shaped them, their leaders, their fractures, and what they represent in the broader tapestry of the 41st millennium. I often think that the Blood Ravens are the closest thing we have to viewing a chapter's identity in real time, constantly shifting, constantly questioned, and always standing on uncertain moral footing. The earliest canonical material surrounding the Blood Ravens situates them as a fleet-based chapter, with the founding date believed to be in the 37th millennium. Very little documentation survives. What fragments do exist point towards a founding that was deliberately obscured. Whether this was done out of necessity, shame, or secrecy is debated, yet the practical impact is the same, a chapter that must work without the stable historical anchor enjoyed by most others. Their battle cry, "Knowledge is power, guard it well," is often dismissed as idiosyncratic, but it tells a more profound truth. For the Blood Ravens, lost knowledge is not merely a symbolic concern, it's a strategic and spiritual imperative. They seek archives as zealously as they prosecute war. The absence of institutional memory formed a vacuum they have spent centuries trying to fill, prompting many of their most far-reaching campaigns. Even before Dawn of War as a game series, this disposition set a pattern of deployments characterized by investigations, reconnaissance-focused crusades, and proactive intervention in conflicts involving ancient artifacts or psychic anomalies. Their unusually high psychic potential is well documented, with librarians holding significant authority within their structure. This has fueled decades of suspicion that their gene line might trace to the Thousand Sons, and while this remains unproven, it is a theory strengthened by the presence of psychic discipline, the thematic fixation on their knowledge, and certain internal schisms that would appear eerily familiar to anyone studying the Horus Heresy. The events of Dawn of War 1 cast the chapter into the spotlight, not merely as protagonists but as subjects of deeper analysis. The Tartarus campaign is often summarized as a chaos incursion culminating in the rise of a demon, but the details reveal the psychological and structural core of the Blood Ravens. Gabriel Angelos, then a captain, embodies the paradox of the chapter: noble, duty-bound, wary of corruption, yet deeply shaped by experience with chaos. His previous actions on Cyrene, where he ordered the exterminatus of an entire world after discovering its gradual corruption, shaped his worldview. It hardened him. It ensured that his threshold for compromise was far lower than that of many Astartes. I've always thought that the tragedy of Gabriel Angelos is that he is a man haunted by the burden of absolute decisions. He acts not from impulsive certainty, but from scars. Tartarus provided the perfect crucible to explore the chapter's nature. The Eldar intervention, the scheming of Sindri Mir, and the corruption of librarian Isidore Achios illustrated the susceptible knowledge-driven chapter can be to manipulation. The fact that Isidore fell not because he sought destruction, but because he sought understanding, remains a vital thematic thread for the Blood Ravens. His downfall warns that knowledge in the 41st millennium is almost always contaminated. The orbital destruction of Tartarus by Angelos, a decision made in direct opposition to Imperial Guard strategy and at odds with civilian survival, stands as a grim echo of Cyrene. He had seen how small seeds of corruption can blossom into catastrophe. His actions demonstrated an uncomfortable but defining truth: the Blood Ravens will sacrifice entire worlds if they believe the long-term consequences justify it. This is the kind of behavior that later makes Imperial authorities question the chapter's motives. Following this, Winter Assault and Dark Crusade introduced a broader coalition of forces into the same theatre, particularly across the world of Lorne 5. While the Blood Ravens were not the exclusive protagonists, their presence in the grander warfare of the Coralva and Coronis systems maintained their reputation as a chapter constantly drawn to sites of ancient power. Dark Crusade's implications for the Necron presence, the planetary tomb complexes, and the troubling survival of Eliphas the Inheritor would all reverberate in later encounters. Eliphas in particular becomes a reoccurring issue for the Blood Ravens, an individual whose survival and spiteful persistence becomes emblematic of Chaos's ability to corrode even well-intentioned chapters by proximity alone. Soulstorm continued the pattern, drawing the Blood Ravens once again towards theatres steeped in relics and power. The Coralva system introduced a vast multi-faction conflict with the Sisters of Battle, Necrons, Eldar, Tau, Orcs, Imperial Guard, and Dark Eldar. The Blood Ravens' involvement here is motivated just as much by strategic necessity as by their instinctual curiosity towards artifacts that should never fall into enemy hands. 'Tis notable that in all these campaigns, the chapter repeatedly encounters remnants of ancient Xenos civilizations and Chaos cults specifically centered on knowledge. It's difficult to ignore the narrative pattern. No matter where the Blood Ravens go, they are drawn into conflict where learning and uncovering truths is both temptation and threat. But Dawn of War 2 is where the Blood Ravens' identity truly because the series shifts from external conflict to internal tension. The Aurelian Crusade is an intimate setting, focused on a small strike force and the moral fibre of its commanders. The Blood Ravens of this era are battered, weary and understaffed. Their battle brothers are dying across multiple fronts, their recruitment worlds are ravaged by Tyranids and Chaos, and their internal unity is crumbling. The player character, often referred to as fans by Aramis, works through Captain Thule, Tarkus, Avitus, Thaddeus and eventually Jonah Orion. The interplay between these figures demonstrates the ideological fissures within the chapter. Tarkus represents duty and discipline. Avitus represents bitterness and simmering resentment. Thaddeus is the embodiment of zeal and the eagerness of youth. Thule is the old commander bearing impossible burdens. And Jonah Orion, the librarian, represents the psychic core of the chapter and its link to more esoteric aspects of the Imperium. Each of them stands at a philosophical crossroads that would later shape the events of Chaos Rising. The Tyranid invasion at this point is more than a simple Xenos threat, it's existential. The Hadron Expanse is under siege by a Hive Fleet splinter, and the worlds of Typhon Primaris, Meridian, Calderis, and Aurelia represent different aspects of the chapter's fading stability. The destruction wrought upon them foreshadows the creeping corruption within the chapter itself. The idea that even as the Blood Ravens defend their worlds, something rots inside their ranks, and mirrors the psychological complexity Dawn of War 2 explored in unprecedented depth. Chaos Rising is often regarded as the most significant narrative shift for the Blood Ravens. With the reappearance of Aurelia from the warp and the insidious spread of Nurgle corruption, the chapter confronts its darkest truth. They have traitors in their midst. The player navigates a corrupted system that reflects not only personal moral choices, but structural vulnerabilities within the chapter. The Blood Ravens' hunger for power, their exposure to Chaos artifacts, and the scars of countless engagements become pressure points exploited by the forces of the ruinous powers. The return of Eliphas is an intentional dagger twist. His intimate awareness of the chapter's flaws makes him an enemy capable of psychological warfare. The corruption of Jonah, Avitus, and the fates of Tarkus and Thaddeus vary depending on choices, but the canonical implications is that the chapter suffers a wide moral break, and Gabriel Angelos ultimately expels entire companies worth of corrupted brothers. This unprecedented purge nearly collapses the chapter. Internal records are sealed, librarians are placed under stricter scrutiny, and Angelos becomes even more severe in his judgment. Retribution continues the consequences of this fracture. The Imperial Inquisition descends on the Blood Ravens with accusations of taint and heresy, prompting 6 parallel narratives depending on the faction. What remains consistent is that the Blood Ravens are badly damaged, both in manpower and reputation. Their actions are marred by suspicion, and their leadership faces near constant oversight. The thematic through line is that the Blood Ravens must rebuild from the inside out. Their loyalty is questioned, their founding mistrusted, and their future uncertain. All of this lays the groundwork for the contemporary era, leading towards a hypothetical Dawn of War 4. What makes the Blood Ravens compelling at this point is that they represent a chapter that has undergone repeated cycles of trauma. They have endured massive casualties, leadership crises, charges of heresy, civil war strains, and near annihilation at the hands of the Tyranids. Their strength now lies not in certainty but resilience. While chapters like the Ultramarines or Imperial Fist lean on established legacy, the Blood Ravens continue to survive by adaptability. Their fleet-based nature means they retain significant mobility despite territorial loss. Their librarians, still numerous, maintain a unique strategic advantage. When looking forward, Dawn of War 2's internal focus created a narrative landscape in which the Blood Raven's survival is not guaranteed, nor is it static. Instead, they are poised to evolve, perhaps reconnect with a hidden past, resolve their founding mystery finally, or confront an existential threat tied to their origins. I sometimes think that the greatest narrative potential lies in forcing the Blood Ravens to confront the truth they've spent millennia avoiding. If their origins are linked to the Thousand Suns, for example, then their existence is a testament to the Imperium's willingness to bury uncomfortable reality. Their actions during the Tartarus and Aurelia campaigns already shows a familiarity with morally grey approaches to warfare that other chapters would hesitate to embrace. And just to shift to a more informal tone for a moment, I've always felt that the Blood Ravens are one of the few chapters that genuinely feel like people. You watch Gabriel lose his brothers, worlds, and his allies. You see Tarkus struggle with his disillusionment, Avitus collapse into bitterness, Thaddeus cling to his idealism. They feel like a chapter that's lived through a war they didn't fully understand, and they've paid the price for it. When people say the Blood Ravens are just the Dawn of War Marines, I always think they're missing the point. The Blood Ravens are what Space Marines look like when they're not insulated by legends, when every decision has a consequence, and the burden of knowledge eats at them from the inside. They're messy, flawed, and brilliant, and also tragic, and that's why they resonate with me. The cultural archetype of the Blood Ravens form around the triad of knowledge, vigilance, and self-reconstruction. Their librarium is the heart of their fleet, and their librarians hold influence comparable to chaplains or even captains. The chapter's traditions emphasize chronicling battles, cataloguing relics, and investigating anomalies. They often appear aloof to the wider Imperium because their priorities differ. They seek understanding rather than blind obedience. This trait has rescued entire systems, but it has also drawn criticism from the Inquisition, especially after Chaos Rising. Their campaigns across Cronus, Aurelia, and Coralva reveal a chapter disproportionately involved in incidents that expose them to chaos. To most chapters, such exposure would be considered dangerously corrupting, yet to the Blood Ravens it is simply another part of their mandate. They believe their destiny is tied to forgotten history. It is their belief that shapes their conduct on the battlefield, methodical, investigative, and surgical. Their strike forces often operate autonomously, engaging in reconnaissance operations and targeted deep strikes. They rarely commit full companies unless necessary. This mirrors their character-driven narrative in Dawn of War 2, where small squads perform the decisive work rather than large formations. Their relationships with other Imperial institutions remains fraught. The Inquisition views them with suspicion, the Mechanicus finds them difficult to manage, and other chapters remain ambivalent or outright dismissive. Yet the Blood Ravens' battlefield record is consistently strong. They have defeated Demon Princes, Hive Fleet Splinters, Eldar War Hosts, Tau Incursion, Necron Forces, and warbands of the Black Legion. Their losses are brutal, but their victories are decisive. A pattern emerges. The Blood Ravens are survivors by necessity. Dawn of War 2's narrative also highlights the importance of Gabriel Angelos as the anchor of the chapter. He is not the perfect commander, he is a burdened one. His experiences have distanced him from many brothers, but earned the absolute loyalty of others. His decisions, Cyrene, Tartarus and the Aurelia Purge were catastrophic yet necessary. In many ways, Angelos is the embodiment of the chapter's greatest truth. Fate has placed them in situations where victory carried a price, almost as heavy as a defeat. What makes the Blood Ravens compelling as we approach the hypothetical Dawn of War 4 campaign is that all their narrative threads remain unresolved. Their founding is unknown, their losses during the Aurelia campaigns have not been fully replenished. Their distrust of external institutions persists. The chapter continues to seek answers in a galaxy that punishes curiosity, and yet their survival now positions them on the cusp of revelation. A future conflict, be it with Chaos Tyranids or even internal truth, could define their next millennia. The Dawn of War series establishes the Blood Ravens as a lens through which the player experiences the moral and ethical complexities of Warhammer 40,000. They reflect the setting's grim truth. Victory is never clean, knowledge is never safe, and loyalty is never guaranteed. They've fought across countless systems tainted by heresy and devastation, lost brothers to corruption and death, and navigated the edge of annihilation. What they gain from this is not glory, but perspective. As an introduction to the chapter before a new era of storytelling, whether in Dawn of War 4 or another medium, it becomes clear that understanding the Blood Ravens requires accepting their contradictions. They are noble, but they are secretive, heroic, but they are compromised. They are brilliant, yet they are dangerously curious. Their strength lies not in purity, but in endurance. They stand as a chapter defined not by certainty, but by the ongoing search for truth in a galaxy that fears it. If anything, the Blood Ravens are poised to continue their journey with the same mixture of tragedy and resilience that has defined them for so long since their first shot on Tartarus. And if the future narratives finally reveal the truth of their origins, confront their unresolved trauma, and test their loyalty once again, it will not be the end of their story, but the beginning of the next chapter in a legacy they are still learning to understand. This archive has now been fully decoded. Continue your journey with the video displayed on screen. The vast wealth of the archives continues to reveal new knowledge of the dark history of the 40k verse. In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war.